Shahbag. The very name evokes the spirit of Dhaka, a bustling intersection pulsating with life, energy, and the chaotic symphony of a city on the move. But on this day, the music stopped. Shahbag, the city's beating heart, was seized, held captive in a tense standoff. Imagine a sea of people, their faces etched with frustration, their voices rising in unison. This was no ordinary traffic jam. This was a city held hostage by a gridlock of despair. The air crackled with a strange mix of anger and resignation. The usual cacophony of horns was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the chants of protesters. This was a blockade, a desperate plea for attention, a cry for justice that reverberated through the stalled cars and anxious onlookers. For 7.5 hours, Shahbag, the artery of Dhaka, became a no-man's land, a stage for a drama of public frustration playing out against the backdrop of a paralyzed city. At the heart of this urban drama stood 35 individuals, their faces etched with a potent blend of determination and desperation. These were not seasoned revolutionaries or hardened activists. These were job aspirants, ordinary citizens with an extraordinary grievance. They were the faces of a generation staring into the abyss of an uncertain future, their dreams seemingly shattered by an age-old barrier. Their demand was simple, their plea heartbreakingly honest: increase the age limit for government jobs to 35. In a country grappling with unemployment and a shrinking job market, this age limit represented a cruel barrier, a line drawn in the sand that excluded countless qualified individuals.
We are not asking for much. We just want a fair chance to prove ourselves, to serve our country.
Their words, amplified by megaphones, cut through the stagnant air, a stark reminder of the human cost of bureaucratic intransigence. As the blockade stretched on, the government's response was swift, if not entirely convincing. A statement was issued, promises were made, and a familiar script was dusted off. The formation of a non-discrimination commission, this new entity, they assured, would address the concerns of the protesters, examining the age limit issue with the utmost seriousness. But for the protesters, weary of empty assurances and bureaucratic maneuvering, these pronouncements rang hollow.
We've heard it all before. Commissions are formed, reports are filed, and nothing changes. Our lives are put on hold while they deliberate in air-conditioned rooms.
Their skepticism was understandable, a reflection of the trust deficit that had come to define the relationship between the governed and the government. The Non-Discrimination Commission, while well-intentioned, felt like a band-aid on a gaping wound, a temporary measure that failed to address the systemic issues at the heart of their plight. Stories from the blockade. The true cost of the blockade wasn't in government pronouncements. It was felt on the streets, in the lives of ordinary citizens. For 7.5 hours, Dhaka held its breath. The elderly sat patiently in stalled rickshaws.
Every minute felt like an eternity. People depended on those medicines.
Patients were left stranded. Russell Meyer's story highlighted the human cost of the blockade. Section 5. The Ultimatum, a promise of more to come. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the weary city, the protesters issued an ultimatum, a 12-hour window for the government to meet their demands. Failure to do so, they warned, would result in further action, a promise of escalating protests that sent shivers down the spines of Dhaka's beleaguered residents. Their ultimatum hung in the air, a heavy shroud of uncertainty settling over the city. Would the government blink? Would they finally acknowledge the urgency of the situation and address the legitimate concerns of these desperate job seekers? Or would Dhaka once again become a battleground for a war of attrition, a city held captive to the whims of a government seemingly tone-deaf to the plight of its people? As the clock ticked down, the questions lingered, a potent reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present potential for chaos in a city on edge. Section 6. Reflections on a day of disruption, a fractured trust. The 7.5-hour blockade at Shahbag was more than just a traffic jam. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a reflection of the growing disconnect between the governed and those in power. The blockade may be over, but the questions it raises continue to reverberate. How can we create a system that is fair, equitable, and responsive to the needs of its citizens? The road ahead is long, the challenge is immense, but the events of this day serve as a potent reminder that the time for complacency is long gone.